Hi guys, it's Ankita. Welcome to Enchanted Bookends. In this video, I am going to talk about the first part of Crime and Punishment by Dostoevsky. This is part of the Crime and Punishment read along, and this will contain spoilers. So if you haven't read the first part yet, you might want to exit out of this video. Before I start talking about the book, let me tell you what my thoughts were when I picked this book up. I knew that this was going to be about a guy who commits a crime and then does not regret what he does, has no remorse whatsoever, and tries to justify the crime. So that's all I knew when I picked this book up. Chapter 1 gave me the chills when Guy Raskolnikov rehearses his crime, and it was chilling to follow him as he goes around, but we also learned that he has some mental health issues, or rather his mental health is suffering, and seems like he rambles to himself, has these addiction to monologues, which I also thought was really interesting because it makes for a really good writing, like a narrative, right? Its narration becomes quite interesting when you have a character who is rambling to himself. Yeah, we also learn that he is in some debt, actually a lot of debt. He goes to this old woman's apartment, and we get the sense that he is planning to kill her at some point, and he has been thinking about this crime for a month, has been planning this in his head, and the first chapter is where he rehearses the entire crime, and like I said, it gave me goosebumps. And then it's interesting how he is very self-aware, but I guess he doesn't really know what is right from wrong, or maybe he does and he just kind of is trying, I don't know, a lot is going on in his head, and it seems like it has been for a month. But he, at the very end of this chapter, he does realize what he is thinking about is wild, and he is really depressed. So he heads off to a drinking den, which I'm guessing is like a pub, and he meets a very interesting character there. The character's name is it Marmeladov? Is that how you say his name? I should have checked the pronunciations before I started recording this video, but I did not, so we are gonna have to stick with that pronunciation for now. So we also are told that Raskolnikov usually does not like company, but all of a sudden he's so depressed, he's drinking in the pub, and he has this longing for company, and his wish turns out to be true. This guy Marmeladov looks at him and he is just like, okay, you are an educated man, so I'm just gonna tell you my entire sob story. And oh my goodness, what a story it was. Seems like this guy has had a really good job, but he is an alcoholic. Yeah, he's like a true alcoholic, where we see his family is suffering, his wife and children are starving. He gets his job back, but he goes back to drinking, spends all of his money, and instead he has realized that he can rely on his daughter to, what's the name of the daughter? Sonia, for money. And it is utterly heartbreaking. What really stood out to me was though that Raskolnikov at the end of the chapter is very briefly, succinctly able to summarize for us this guy's situation, that he has struck gold with his daughter Sonia, and he knows he can go to her to get money and she is not going to reproach him. And the family, they have just gotten used to this. There are some pretty interesting lines in this one on page 17, and then I'm talking about this one. This is chapter 2, page 17, second paragraph. This guy, he says, poverty is not a sin, but destitution, that is a sin. When a man is poor, he may still preserve the nobility of his inborn feelings, But when he's destitute, he never ever can. And yeah, destitution is where you're not just poor, but you are absolutely miserable. And when you are so miserable, where people treat you so poorly, I guess the question of morality might be really, really low. There are some really great lines this guy says. Like on page 19, he says, "Everyone must have at least somewhere to go, for there comes a time in every man's life when he simply must have somewhere he can go." And yes, this is quite really, really true that everyone must have somewhere to go, some safe place. Again, on page 21, he repeats that at the end. Do you understand, dear sir, what it means to have nowhere left to go? I guess this guy is just deluded, because he definitely has some place to go. He has his job. He had his job and he, couldn't keep it because of his drinking habit. Yeah, he is deluded. He has somewhere to go. He has his daughter who he knows didn't really have to go into prostitution, but it never stops her. That scene where he goes back to his wife and his wife starts pulling his hair and there's a lot of screaming and shouting, and the kids, poor kids, they're starving. But the trauma, how do you ever get over such trauma? You never can. At the end of this chapter, Raskolnikov, his thought process is really scary. Man can get used to anything, the villain. And then in the last paragraph he says, well, and what if I'm mistaken? What if man, the whole human race in general, isn't really a villain at all? If that's true, it means that all the rest is just a load of superstition, just a lot of fears that have been put into people's heads. And there are no limits, and that's how it's meant to be. Yeah, this sort of like questioning line of thinking is what takes him to the place where he is in the last chapter of this part 1. In chapter 3, we see that there's this girl, Natasha, who comes to clean his house or apartment, and she uses used tea leaves to make tea. And I was like, that is really sad. That is absolutely sad. Like, have you ever made tea with used leaves? I mean, I have, but I always add like fresh leaves with the used ones, and still the tea is always it's not as strong. And to drink such sad tea, oh my goodness. But it looks like he has someone who looks after him. And then when he receives a letter from his mother, he starts crying, right? His hands tremble, and made me wonder if he's really close with his mom. And then we get to know his first name, Rodia, which I'm sure is like a nickname. Anyway, we get to know what's happening at his mom's place. His sister has this wild adventure, and to me that story, the way his mother writes the letter, is so hilarious. I was totally judging her, the way she keeps on reminding Rodia, Raskolnikov, to not judge this guy that his sister is engaged to, but at the same time she keeps judging him, telling these things to Rodia. How is a brother not supposed to judge someone, especially this guy, what's his name, Lazhan? And he seems to be in civil service, is doing well, and his mother has like mapped out this entire plan for not only his sister but also for the son. And it seems like she is almost sacrificing the daughter for the son. So that I wasn't as shocked when I was reading this letter. In fact, the next chapter made me think more about how his mother basically was manipulating him. She's basically willing to sacrifice this daughter's life to a man who is very misogynist. He wants a wife who doesn't have a dowry, so that the wife has a feeling of gratitude towards the husband. Yeah, it's just very twisted, misogynist. materialistic views. No wonder our protagonist, Raskolnikov, is extremely agitated after reading the letter. He knows what his mother is trying to do. So that's what happens in the next chapter. At the beginning of the 4th chapter, I was thinking, oh, maybe Raskolnikov is going to take advantage of him, because we do know that he is in debt. In the 1st chapter, he goes to this lady to pawn his watch, and we know that he already has pawned something before that. So we know he's in debt. He is afraid to run into his landlady. Possibly he hasn't even paid the rent. I was surprised when he declared in chapter 4 that this marriage will not take place, because my head was like, oh, okay, Raskolnikov is going to take advantage of this. He needs it. And he is. But yeah, he is a bit insane. He's not in the right state of mind. But then he goes on to explain why he thinks that should not happen. And I kind of agreed with him. And then on page 62, he runs into this young woman who's in a red dress, and she has possibly been drugged and she is not in a good state. I thought she is going to turn out to be Sonia, but we really don't learn who she is, right? I was so confused. At first, he was all about protecting her, very protective. And I was thinking, okay, so far we have seen that Raskolnikov can be good. He leaves a coin for Marmeladov's family, right? And then here he's trying to protect this young girl from a man who was totally trying to prey on her. Then on page 62, he says the guy might as well take advantage of the girl. I was like, okay, this guy is totally nuts. Something terribly wrong with this guy. And I was wondering, is it because he gave money, right? He lost money, but still, I just couldn't wrap my head around this. I cannot figure this guy out. He is very confusing. He's totally crazy, and he has to be for what he does next, right? Even in the next chapters. Then we are told about his university friend, but we also told a few things about this guy, that he always looked down upon everyone. Raskolnikov would always look down upon his university friends. He never took part in any communal gatherings, their discussions, their amusements. And he used to study intensely, but he was always poor. But at the same time, the fellow students had an impression that he looked down upon them, considered them very inferior to him. But he had gotten along with this guy, Razumikin. It seems like this guy was friends with everyone, but he doesn't go to meet him, right? Yeah, I thought we will be introduced to another character. That doesn't end up happening. Okay, so chapter 5 is the one in which he has a dream, and the dream was just horrible. The way the entire scene was described was horrendous. Trigger warnings, animal brutality. It was heartbreaking. I was like, no, stop, you devils. But then he is a young boy. Raskolnikov is a young boy in his dream, and he is heartbroken. He is so sad, he's crying. He runs to this little horse and hugs the horse. And then when he wakes up, he's really relieved that it is a dream. And then he starts questioning that did he even have the endurance to rehearse the entire crime? And he has this question of whether he should go through with what he has planned or he shouldn't. And then we learn that Raskolnikov is a little bit superstitious. All of these things, like events, happen one after the other. You know, the sister of this old lady, Alyona, the sister's name is Elizabeth Rita. And she seems like a really lovely lady, right? And she's so young, and she seems like does all the work for this old lady. And then he ends up at a pub where he overhears these two people talk about how mean this old lady is, Alyona, and Raskolnikov, because he is superstitious, or I don't know how his brain works, honestly. He's like a really insane person, very scary. And he began to relate how mean and capricious she was. On page 80, in the last paragraph, this guy is saying, the guy who thinks that he should go and murder this old lady Alyona, He says that, wouldn't one petty little crime like that be atoned for by all those thousands of good deeds? Instead of one life, thousands of lives rescued from corruption and decay. It made me think of this entire, like the murder of United Healthcare CEO, and how a lot of people on social media thought that it was the right thing to do. It's just twisted. It's very twisted. But it seems like Raskolnikov totally agreed with this young man's thoughts that this guy is just like, he's just talking. He has no intentions of actually murdering this woman. He is just, having this conversation. He's possibly really mad at that old woman and is taking out his frustration. But Raskolnikov is totally insane. He gets excited by this conversation. It kind of like, it strengthens his dream that he's been having for 1 month to commit this crime, to murder this old lady. Raskolnikov was in a state of extreme excitement. No wonder. He's like a total madman. Towards the end of page 81, the author says that this trivial eating house conversation, it wasn't even a drinking house, eating house, so I'm guessing that's a restaurant, diner. Eating house conversation had an extremely strong influence on him during the subsequent development of the affair, as though here some form of predestination of augury had been at work. And isn't it very strange that in the dream, Raskolnikov is horrified how everyone beats the little horse, and he's like totally heartbroken when the drunkards, when all these drunkards, they kill the horse. But he himself, when he's wide awake, he is planning a murder. He's planning to murder an old woman with an axe. He's like totally starting to plan this murder. So that's what happens next, right? He is now determined. He knows he's gonna commit the crime, so he's now starting to make preparations for the murder. He has the plan already. He has been planning for a month, and now he just needs supplies, I guess, to commit this crime. What do you make of this? That in his dream he was horrified by a crime, and he was also grateful that it was only a dream. But here he, in reality, while he's wide awake, he is planning to murder an old woman. And on page 87, the author says that the sole reason that what he had planned was not a crime. I mean, he totally believes that it's not a crime. Like, there's something really askewed with his way of thinking. He was like probably hit on his head, like fell on his head or something when he was a baby. Can we talk about chapter 7? It was terrible. I was thinking he will not commit a crime. Instead, what we end up with is 2 murders. The way the second murder was described, where this woman, Lizaveta, is so meek that she didn't even like fully cover her head. And then when the 2 men come, they're waiting outside the apartment. I was thinking, what if he ends up killing those men as well? I mean, he was totally prepared to do that. In the first few chapters, I thought, okay, he's thinking about it, but there's some goodness in him. But for sure, nothing he's gonna do is gonna ever fix this, right? Fix a murder. I have no idea where this story is gonna go next. I have a feeling that next we're gonna see him meet this fiance, his sister's fiance, and he does end up stealing from the old lady, so he's probably gonna have money. He's not a drunkard or an alcoholic, so he's definitely not gonna spend all of the money on drinking. I wonder what he's gonna do with that money. Is he gonna give it to his sister so that she doesn't have to marry that guy? Is he gonna continue his studies, because we know that he dropped out of university? Is he gonna go back? Is he gonna study? Is he gonna become like a big man? But this crime that he's committed will always keep him from being happy and from feeling joyous. I have no idea, because you cannot predict what an insane person is going to do or feel. Let me know in the comments down below what you think Raskolnikov's going to do next, or where the story is going to end up. Well, if you made it so far in this video, thank you for watching, And don't forget to like the video, subscribe to my channel if you haven't already, and I will see you next time when I finish part 2. Until then, take care.